How far has America come that a black man can murder a woman he thought was white, and there aren't mobs of white men storming into black neighborhoods the next day? No retaliatory lynchings, no cities burning. That's how it used to be. Think back. Emmett Till was just 14 years old when he was dragged from his grandfather's home and butchered in Mississippi. Why? Because of the rumor that he had whistled at a white woman. Fast forward to now. Iryna Zarutska, a young Ukrainian refugee, was stabbed to death on a Charlotte light rail. It's on video. Her killer shouted, "I got that white woman." But here's the thing. She wasn't white. She was Ukrainian. And that makes the whole thing that much more horrific. She survived the war. She escaped Russia's bombs, but she couldn't survive a single year in an American city. And why? Because America has been fed a steady diet of racial poison, language meant to pit us against each other. Since the Obama presidency, we've been told to obsess over color, to see it in every dispute, to see every dispute through the lens of race. And it's worked. Generations of conflict reignited. Americans kept at each other's throats. It's not just about inventing categories of race, which is what it is. It's about weaponizing them, teaching people to live by them, to hate by them. And in America, two groups have carried this hatred to the max. White supremacists, who are a minority within white culture, and black supremacists, who now make up a larger majority inside black America than anyone wants to admit. Iryna, coming from Ukraine, wouldn't have known any of this. I know, I've spent time in Ukraine myself. Ukrainians look at Americans and just see Americans. Not black, not white, not hyphenated identities, just Americans. Race isn't absent, but it doesn't dominate any conversation there. It doesn't define who you are. For them, racism is a uniquely American obsession. They see it on TV, but they don't live it. It doesn't make sense to them. I've had frank conversations with friends in Ukraine about this. In Ukraine, Poland, and Russia, Slavic people just don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to them. It's completely illogical. They just don't get it, and they find it frustrating that we have these problems here. Slavic people historically were treated like of the white world. They were denied rights, they were looked down on, not considered fully equal. Of all the people on earth, Slavs, especially Ukrainians, share more in common with black struggle than almost anyone else. The Soviets even leaned heavily into this. People forget Russia's most celebrated writer, Alexander Pushkin, was African. His family was honored in Russia long before the American Civil War. Racism hadn't taken hold among the Slavs the same way because they themselves were the oppressed. Later, the USSR, for all its brutality, prided itself on not being racist. Thousands of black Americans and Africans found work there as engineers, chemists, professors. At the same time, Rosa Parks was still getting arrested back home. Now, was life under Stalin paradise for dark-skinned people? No. But racism wasn't the primary problem. And that's what makes Iryna's killing so tragic. She fled a war. She came from a people who know oppression firsthand. She came from a culture that never swallowed the virus of racial hatred. And she died at the hands of a man who embodied it. DeCarlos Brown didn't see her history. He didn't see her suffering. He didn't care she was a refugee who had already lost her homeland. Blinded by hate, raised in a culture that excuses racial violence, he saw her as an easy victim to play out his fantasy of supremacy. What taught him that this was okay? Was it the media telling him to hate white people? Was it the music, TV, his lived experiences? Or was it just his own evil? Here's the reality. White America, for the most part, has grown past its obsession with racial violence. And during the Civil Rights era, even the black victims of that violence sought reconciliation, not revenge. But now a new strain has emerged, a culture of grievance, victimhood, and vengeance. Schooled in the ideology of domination, fueled by ghetto culture, it's become a threat to the unity we've tried to build since Martin Luther King was walking the streets. This culture has turned victimhood into a weapon. Smash and grab thefts in stores, knockout games targeting white people, violence excused as payback. A black America turning away from the hope that carried it through slavery and segregation, and turning instead towards vulgarity, barbarism, and separation from the very society it claims to fight for. And why? Because of policy. The degradation of black America is rooted in drugs and in Johnson's Great Society. Before all that, black mobility was rising. In 1980, before the CIA-fueled crack epidemic, black economic progress matched and sometimes exceeded white communities. Desegregation was happening naturally. Families were intact. Progress was real, but socialist policies wrecked all that. Kennedy's vision was to integrate the poor into communities so that they weren't cut off and separated. Johnson's plan was different. He wanted ghettos. He built them. Government housing stacked the poor together, isolated and dependent, and mostly black. Redlining sealed the trap. That foundation led straight to the crack epidemic, and it destroyed what remained of black culture and black families. Generations were lost. What came out of it was a community more parasitic, narcissistic, and violent, undoing decades of genuine progress. Which brings us back to Iryna. The tragedy of her death isn't just one man's violence, it's the failure of a system that collapses lives at home and abroad. DeCarlos Brown was a product of that system. Johnson's Great Society fractured families and left his community vulnerable, unstable. Courts and politicians, blinded by woke ideology, allowed violent men like him to roam free. And Iryna herself, she never would have been in Charlotte to begin with. She was only there because the global left destroyed her country, backing regime change in Kiev back in 2014, and then pushing a proxy war with Moscow that turned Ukraine into a battlefield. She fled one disaster created by the left, only to die in another. Twice a victim of the same system.